Next Monday, January 13th, today is Monday, January 6th. And next Monday, January 13th, we finally get rid of the commissioner who lives in Texas. We have 3 Bonner County commissioners. One of them actually lives in Texas and should not be a commissioner at all. Why? Now, let me explain. State law says that if you don't live in Bonner County, you cannot be an elected Bonner County commissioner. And the minute you move out of Bonner County, you actually vacate the office of Bonner County commissioner. And Steve Bradshaw moved in Texas. That's one issue. Next Monday, we will see Brian Domke sworn in because he got elected at the November 5th general election. Steve Bradshaw did not run for Bonner County Commissioner. Brian Domke will be sworn in. In the meantime, we have an issue with our sheriff, and this has been in the press lately, and it's actually misunderstood. It's misunderstood what the issue is. Let me explain what the issue is with Bonner County Sheriff Daryl Wheeler. Okay, in 2023, in the Senate, I voted for Senate Bill 1054. It passed. Overwhelmingly, the governor signed it into law. Here's what it was designed to do. Law enforcement is eligible to receive PERSI under the Rule of 80. The Rule of 80 says that you take the total number of years you've been in service, like you've been a police officer working for a PERSI employer, and that's Idaho's pension program. And you've been working, let's say you started your job as a police officer at 20, and you worked for 30 years. For police officers, the Rule of 80 says that you could take full retirement when your age plus the number of years you worked for the employer equals 80. So if you started at 20, you've worked for 30 years, you're now 50, you take your age 50 plus 30 years of service, meets the Rule of 80, you can retire at age 50 with full PERSI retirement benefit payments. Okay. Now, so we've got law enforcement. Now, the old rules used to be the Rule of 90. So if you had started at 20 under the old rules, you'd have to wait till you're 55, and then you take your age 55 plus 35 years on the job, that's 90. Now you're eligible to receive full retirement. That was the old rule. So what's happened is law enforcement retires earlier, and they're young, and they're still capable. And ever since COVID, we've had problems in the workforce where we lack workers. So we wanted to allow experienced law enforcement to fill jobs that are needed to be filled in law enforcement. So let's say you've retired, you're collecting PERSI, you want to take a position back, and a new open position that needs experienced law enforcement experience. You're a great candidate, but if you take the job, you have to give up your retirement payments. Well, we allow you to continue your retirement payments under the bill we passed in 2023, and that helps fill needs for staffing of law enforcement to keep our communities safe. All right, here's the key. In order to qualify to keep your benefit payments under retirement and to be reemployed by a PERSI employer, which basically is government, you need to be separated. There needs to be what's called a bona fide separation, which is defined as more than 30 days off the job. If you were more than 30 days off the job with no guaranteed reemployment from the PERSI employer, you had a bona fide separation. And therefore, you could retire for only 30 days, 31 days specifically, take a job back with any PERSI employer, and be receiving retirement benefit payments every month plus your new salary for that job. Daryl Wheeler had this idea that he was going to take advantage of this. So he didn't have his employment guaranteed by the PERSI employer, Bonner County. He's the Bonner County Sheriff. He didn't have his retirement guaranteed by them, his reemployment. It was guaranteed by the voters because he won the general election. All right, you could argue, well, he knew he was getting his job back. Fine. But IRS rules is kind of what Idaho law is designed after, and they considered elected officials to be in their own special category where it's not the employer that guaranteed their rehire, it's the voter. All right, so he's okay on that front. Question, is he going to be separated from Bonner County employment for 30 days? So what he did was on Friday night, December 13th, Friday the 13th at 8:59 p.m., which is 31 days prior to him being sworn into his 5th term of office as sheriff, and then he'll be sheriff for 4 years. 4 more years. So he sent an email announcing that he was resigning from the position of Bonner County Sheriff Friday night, December 13th at 8:59 p.m., 31 days before he will technically be rehired and be sworn in next Monday, January 13th, for his 5th term as Bonner County Sheriff. So he sends it to the 3 commissioners, including the commissioner who lives in Texas, who shouldn't be a commissioner. So he sends it to Ron Korn, Asia Williams, and Steve Bradshaw. So the email announcing his retirement is sitting in their email inbox on a Friday night at 8:59 p.m. Here's the problem. Elected officials can't just quit, all right? Especially if you're sheriff, if you're prosecutor. You have a duty to the people who elected you, and we have laws about even how you resign, okay? The public, why do we have that? The public needs to know who to turn to for law enforcement. The sheriff is the only and chief law enforcement officer in the county. He hires his deputies. We need to know that there is a law enforcement person to turn to. Okay, so what does the law say about resigning, about quitting your job? Steve Bradshaw last week tried to argue that if the guy wants to quit, he gets to quit. Well, technically that's true. However, there's a process by which you quit for elected officials because of their duty and responsibility to the taxpayers. They're not just like employees. They're employed by the taxpayers. And so here's what the law says, and the rule of law matters because the law was developed by your legislators in Boise who are meeting right now. The law was developed by them to benefit the public, to serve the public's interest. And here's what it says. It's a very particular statute. It's 59-902. It's on resignations. And it says, when the sheriff resigns, he is to submit in writing his resignation letter to the board of county commissioners. That consists of 3 commissioners. But it says that the resignation, and pay attention to the wording, shall not take effect until it is accepted by the board. That's what it says. That's what the law says. Here's the problem. If an email is sitting in the commissioners' inboxes on a Friday night, they are individual commissioners. How does the board, here's the word the law uses is accept. How does the board accept a resignation? Well, guess what? You can't, as a board, accept it individually by each of the individual commissioners. You have to act as a group. And the way a board acts is they act by majority vote. And because of our other laws in Idaho about public meetings, no business can be conducted by the board except in a noticed open public meeting. And therefore, Friday night at 8:59 p.m., they're not going to have time to meet and act on it. Minimally until Monday, December 16th, which now is less than 30 days that the sheriff needed to be separated. And the resignation shall not go into effect until it's accepted by the board. Now, so the key is it's not just accepted by the individual commissioners. It has to be acted on by the board and accepted. Now, Steve Bradshaw last week said, yeah, but does that mean the commissioners can deny a resignation? Well, the word is they have to accept it in order for it to go into effect. Theoretically, if they have to accept it in order for it to go into effect, that also implies that they might be able to deny the resignation. Now, the reality is I think a judge isn't going to support them denying a resignation for any old reason. But I give you this, they could certainly delay the resignation. What if your sheriff wanted to resign during a public emergency? What if your sheriff wanted to resign when he was under investigation for corruption? There are reasons why the Bonner County Commissioners as a board may want to delay a resignation. And I think that's what the law contemplates. So that's the issue. To this day, Bonner County the Board of Commissioners have not accepted Daryl Wheeler's resignation. Instead, They had an opportunity at last Tuesday's business meeting to do so. Ron Korn made a motion to accept his resignation, and Asia Williams voted to abstain from that vote. And our Texas commissioner who lives in Yantis, Texas, Steve Bradshaw, the cowboy pastor, also abstained, and only Ron Korn voted for that motion. And when you have two people abstain and one person vote for it, the motion actually fails, which means they did not accept his resignation. Daryl Wheeler, by law, is technically not resigned from his office. He's not going to be eligible for Percy, in my opinion. Now, who's going to ultimately make that decision? We're going to find out. Okay, but that's what the law says, and the law is important. It's important that we follow the law because we gave it to our legislature to make law in the interest of who? Bonner County citizens and Idaho citizens, the people of the state of Idaho. If we ignore the law for anybody, then we are living in a lawless land. And if you want to go see what it looks like to live in a lawless land, go to California. Go to Oregon, go to Washington, go to other countries, and you'll find out that the rule of law really matters. Every law matters. And so that's basically where we are with the sheriff's resignation. Now, the county has taken, frankly, an utterly ridiculous opinion. Let me give you their opinion. This would be the Bonner County Prosecutor's Office. The Bonner County Prosecutor's Office is the elected prosecutor, Lewis Marshall, and the people that he employs. And last Monday, that would be Monday, December 30th, I met with Lewis Marshall for 1 hour. It was about 50 minutes at lunchtime. And he told me, Scott, your interpretation of Idaho law regarding the sheriff could be the correct one, and I'm going to tell the Bonner County commissioners before the December 31st business meeting last Tuesday that you could be correct on your interpretation. Well, guess what? Lewis told me he was going to do that, and then he did not do that. Let me tell you what a person who works in his office that he employs named Bill Wilson did tell the commissioners several days before that. He said that the word accept in Idaho law means to receive, meaning simply that if the sheriff sends in a resignation and it's sitting in your email inbox, that means that the Board of Commissioners has accepted the resignation. Frankly, that's ridiculous because if I go to the Oxford English Dictionary or Webster's, accept means to receive with consent. You actually have to take action on it. And at last week's meeting, Ron pointed out if Bonner County receives a contract in the mail, just because the contract is sitting in the post office mailbox for Bonner County, if you go with Bill Wilson's interpretation, then that would mean that just because it's sitting there, that the county has accepted the contract. Is that true? And then there were people who said, well, that's ridiculous. That's totally different. Is it really different? Is it? Is it different? We're talking about simple English words here. If the legislature meant that the word should be received, guess what? The legislature would have used in the statute, Section 59902, the word receive. But the legislature didn't use the word receive. The legislature used the word accept. The board must accept, not the individual commissioners must accept, but the board must accept the resignation, and it won't be in effect until they do. And to this day, they have not done that. Now, I have heard that the sheriff is not happy, but it was entirely the sheriff's fault. The sheriff literally could have resigned 2 weeks earlier. He could have given a letter that he was intending to resign an entire 1 month earlier and still waited to resign until December 13th, and he would have been completely within the law. It is entirely upon the sheriff that he waited until literally the last minute. I mean, arguably, if he'd waited until 11:59 p.m., you could argue that's definitely the last minute. But he sent the resignation letter at 8:59 p.m. on the last possible day he could resign to get Percy, and gave no opportunity for the board to accept it and act on it. And that's on him. He could have done it, and he knew how to do it because numerous Bonner County elected officials have resigned by giving notice ahead of time. Okay, well, that's your update on the Bonner County Sheriff's resignation, and I'm Scott Herndon. I'll talk to you soon.